Joseph Smith's associates on his treasure case. And they thought, oh, Joseph Smith actually found something? Oh, well, part of that's ours too, because we've got articles of incorporation that says your percentage, my percentage, and we need what's ours. So all this stuff revolves around it, and then to find out that Joseph Smith, when he's translating the Book of Mormon, never looked at the gold plates at all. And for some people, it raises the question, how come? Why all this trouble with the gold plates? And then it starts to sound sort of like a story that Joseph Smith made up and that many people were willing to believe. Also over here, talking about boomers and generational arguments, things that appeal to different generations. There's probably some truth to that. Probably. But I believe that logic is not generational. And common sense is not generational.
Well, you can clap.
You just start, then stop.
It's not going to run.
I think that people who are 28, 38, 12, I think they understand common sense. And common sense speaks to people because we're people and we all understand common sense. Sometimes faith gets in the way of common sense if it is misplaced. And the problem then is that you have to argue against your common sense in order to defend your faith. I've been through that so many times. In law, it's called special pleading. I finally got sick and tired of making excuses for Joseph Smith that I would never make for anybody else in any other religion or in no religion whatsoever.
Yep, exactly.
Or Brigham Young or whoever. And I finally had to stop and say, I'm not being honest with myself. I'm not being honest with the facts. I need to treat these people, even though I revere them as prophets, the same way I would treat anybody else. And in fact, they should be on a higher standard of behavior. They should do things better. I know a lot of times the temptation, I've been there, I was an apologist, okay, for the church. The temptation is, oh, well, we're going to make an excuse for this apostle for doing something wrong. Or like, Elder Ballard, right? Elder Ballard says that nobody in the church, none of the leaders in the church have ever hidden anything from anybody. Oh, what a whopper. That was like 4 Pinocchios on that one. And we make excuses for them, when actually what we should be doing is holding them to a higher standard because they're apostles of Jesus Christ, or at least they claim to. So those are my feelings on the subject. I hope I've covered everything. I will say one thing that I do want to say before talking about Kwaku and talking about loving other people, which I think is important. I can't speak for everybody, and I wouldn't presume to speak for you. But my experience in Mormonism is that Mormonism taught me to love people, other people, in spite of who they are. And now that I have transcended and graduated from Mormonism, I understand that I can love people because of who they are.
A 3-minute summary.
So just so I understand,
We're going to get back to there we go.
okay, is this a response to RFM or on the Book of Mormon?
Anything you want. Anything you want to say.
Okay, all right. Okay.
I know Justin Bieber's last album was an ad.
So what we just heard to me felt like a bit of a rant. I want to keep this precise in understanding the fact that you can take a very cynical view of history and you can say, oh, he did this and he did this and he did this, and the history of the magic doesn't actually matter. But ultimately what that means is RFM just does not believe in that magic. He just does not
instead of wearing masks. I know.
I know you don't believe in really anything. And that's okay. But this idea that, oh, common sense leads you to be atheistic or secular, it's just not true. Try this out. After you leave it here, go to Barnes & Noble and go to the self-transformation section and just look at the crystals and tarot card books that are flying off the shelves by millennials and Gen Z. And I want you to think about that specifically because even though the secularist narrative has been pushed forward, people naturally still go to spirituality and faith. It will not go away. The magic does not go away. No matter how many PDFs and articles you write, it will not go away. because there's something intrinsically a part of every human being that wants that. And when you take it away, you get sad. When you take it away, you become unhappy. I know there's a lot of jokes being made about Moroni's sexy robe or whatever you want to say, but this isn't really humorous. We're talking about people's families being split apart because of religion, divorce is happening. We're talking about children in schools, possibly taking upon a lot of transformative surgeries with gender and things of that nature. We're talking about very, very important specific things. Thanks, Siri. We're talking about very, very important specific things.
Oh,
and it's not really
he
fun.
went there. Oh,
it's
no, no,
serious.
no.
A lot of ex-Mormons in here know, I know you know, the trauma of leaving the faith is not that funny. So let's treat it seriously. Our history does matter, and our spirituality does matter, and you can villainize the prophets who created a pretty great church where you find community in just about anywhere you go, and you can say, oh, it's all lies, they're bad people, the art is bad, and now I have to defend bad people, and I can just love people now that I've left exactly how they are, because yes, everybody matters and I'll get a trophy. Or we can be real,
Isn't very
and preserve what we have, and we can actually live up to what we're supposed to be living up to as Christians. The magic is real, the spirituality does matter, and your secular narrative will lead people to be miserable, it will lead people to get divorced, to self-harm, to do all manner of terrible things. That's the reality, and that's what we see. So we can laugh at it or we can deal with the reality, but our society is falling literally because of the things you are espousing.
I would say I agree that you need to use logic and reason, and that if the institution is strong, it will stand and be being subject to that logic and reason. I don't think logic and reason can work if they are under the duress of hyper-cynicism. And my only fear with the modern, secular, progressive narrative is it cultivates this cynicism that doesn't allow common sense to treat it.
Oh, God. No, 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 no.
I'll give you 30 seconds.
Oh, no.
Be respectful. They're trying to get stuff out. I know you like points being made. Just try to be respectful. They're representing they're your voice. Let them be your voice. You have 3 minutes for summary. We're under RFM.
Oh,
Yeah.
am I summarizing about the Book of Mormon?
Summary of Book of Mormon and what's been said so far.
Okay. Well, I agree with Kwaku that there will always be this desire for the magic, for the supernatural, for the religious.
I don't know why they're writing that.
I think probably predominantly history is the indicator. But just as sure as that, there will always be unscrupulous people there to take advantage of it and to use that in order to aggrandize themselves, perhaps with money, perhaps with fame, perhaps with sex. You know, the three biggies that the Book of Mormon tells us about, right? So, I think that is always, but it's like P.T. Barnum said, right? There's a sucker born every minute.
It's RFM, Radio
And I
Free
was a
Mormon.
sucker for 40 years.
No,
Absolutely. I
they're
admit to
debating
that.
RFM.
I will also say about the Book of Mormon that even
Just
though,
Google
I mean,
Radio
I've read it
Free
30
Mormon.
times now, know it backward and forward, have passages, many passages memorized in the Book of Mormon. I think there is much to recommend it. But I also, earlier this year, read View of the Hebrews, which was a book that was written earlier than the Book of Mormon. And what it does is it shows what the common understanding in Joseph Smith's day and time was about the Native Americans, that they were descendants of Jews, that they came over here a long time ago, and then they became these people, these large people. Part of them were white, part of them were dark-skinned, and the white people destroyed the dark-skinned people who remained alive, and the colonists, right? And I realized, once again, that the Book of Mormon is exactly the kind of book that we would expect to be written in the early 19th century as a history of the American Indians. And I will tell you also, that I hear sometimes from apologists, I mean, heaven forbid, I probably made the argument myself, that as time goes by, archaeology and discoveries tend to support the Book of Mormon more and more. Well, I will tell you, back in Joseph Smith's day, basically everybody believed that the American Indians, the Native Americans, were descendants of Jewish people. Today, nobody does, except for literalist believers of the Book of Mormon.
Thank you. We keep your microphone on the pocket. The receiver.
Oh, this thing? That here? My other pocket?
There's a short circuit in the wire.
They did show up.
Okay.
Do you have a cell phone in your pocket? Sometimes
No. Oh, I do. No, that's my wallet. Wait a second. Is my cell phone in here, Jack?
Boomer.
I'm such a boomer. Did you know when I got my airline reservations, I had to go out to the airport? Can you hold on this?
Okay.
I didn't even get the boomer jokes. That's how I don't know why that was funny, but it was hilarious.
Does this backdrop look like the Partridge Family school bus or what?
Oh.
I never good night.
Yes. It's at Shawnee Queenie's church. That is correct.
LDS doctrine and practice to Midnight Mormon crew. Are LDS doctrines eternal in nature? If so,
Yes, they're wearing
bulletproof
instead of wearing a mask. I know.
And do you personally believe that the specific doctrine is in fact eternal, and that it will be practiced after this life in the celestial glories by faithful members who choose to embrace it here or there? To add flavor to the mix, do you believe that Brigham and Joseph, even though the fleshly practice doesn't continue in the present day church today, are still sealed to all of their wives eternally? Do you believe that the two women to whom the present day prophet Russell M. Nielsen is sealed to will be his for eternity after this life? And then finally, and you can just take the zeitgeist of this and say there's a lot there. And finally, are you under the impression that the practice may someday return to mortal members here on earth? And if it does, would you participate in it if it was being requisite for the highest degree of salvation?
So I'm actually the only one on stage with a immediate history of polygamy in their family. My mom was a polygamous wife in the Moorish Science Temple religion. My mother fled when I was just about a baby to Texas. I've seen the effects that intense, small cults have on people. My mother lived it. I've talked with her about it. There's some crazy stories. And what I can tell you about the polygamy in LDS history, and polygamy from really being one generation removed, is that nobody understands it except those in it. So when we look at polygamy, and we look at the way it happened in the 19th century, and it happened with Joseph Smith, we can make a million assumptions. And you can take the cynical assumption, and you can take the positive assumption, but the reality is none of us were there. What we know is that some of the women were fine with it, and some of them were not. We can make an assumption and say, oh, they were coerced, or we can leave it up to their narrative and believe their voices. I don't know if it's going to continue in the next life, but we've seen marriage transform radically in the last couple of years. It wasn't until 2014 that the Supreme Court allowed two men who love each other, two women who love each other, to actually get married.
This is a debate forum.
Don't have this actual grasp of marriage that we seem to do. Sociologically, we've seen it change. We're going to see it continue to change. So unless you're a sociologist and a historian on marriage in ancient Samaria, Greece, Rome, Israel, and Nauvoo, none of us really have the most perfect understanding of it. But it does not mean that you can't live a meaningful life. It does not mean that, my mother's a testament of it. It does not mean that those who were involved in it were just evil, bad people. Because I don't think my father was an evil, bad person. So, this is a subject that's brought up to bring out a lot of emotions in people.
I don't know.
But let's take a step back and understand that none of us were there. And as someone who's one generation removed, I can tell you that any assumptions we're going to make may very well be incorrect. To me, I can't speak for what happened in heaven. None of us even know that much about heaven. But if you want to make the assumption that Mormon heaven is horrible for women and it's terrible, then you don't really know what heaven is. And that's a purposeful assumption so those insecure, and discomforted by their faith. But we know that heaven is supposed to be all things good, and we even know that Mormon heaven has multiple layers and kingdoms. That I believe two a man and a woman will be in.
I know. The best. I know, that's what I was gonna say. The girls is supposed to keep them safe.
So that's just what I would say, that you can't be too cynical on this subject, and let's be quite charitable in understanding that nobody here, I'm assuming, is polygamous, or is one generation removed from it.
Answer their question, Kwaku. You haven't answered their question.
5 minutes.
Okay, I'll just say my 2 cents worth. I really like the word that Kwaku used of a charitable interpretation of polygamy. We all face it in a modern context. Polygamy is weird, but I've always been a fan of history, and so weird things in history were nothing new to me. And I think a lot of our modern inquiry into polygamy is looked at 2 ways. I struggle sometimes when I believe you. First off, I believe you that when you're telling your lived experience, that you're saying that maybe you felt in the 70s and 80s that some of these things were hid from you or whatever. I would prefer to look more charitably on our ancestors as having been so occupied with the positive expanse of the church that they didn't get into the details. But I don't know what to think sometimes, because my entire life I've known about the Sears Stones. I've known about polygamy. I've known about the Mountain Meadows Massacre. I look at this modern argument that the church is hiding something from you, polygamy included, and I just think every one of these weird things you've mentioned, from the Kinderhook plates to polygamy to et al. You're a lawyer, and I gotta use these cool terms, right? Yeah, I got a week on it. So all of these, I could go into any chapel in our church right now and blow the dust off of that 12-volume set of history of the church, and it's in there. And so I view that not as an indictment of Mormonism at large, but an indictment of us as a people and a culture for not having taken seriously the inquiry of our faith. And I think we should. Weird stuff like polygamy included, because it shows us that as flawed individuals, we still have a place in history. We can repent of these weird flaws. We can fix them, and we can do it generally through spirituality and modern revelation. And then in regards to the weirdness of polygamy, like, first off, yes, I practice polygamy if it was you, Sean. You know what I'm saying?
Well, hey, at least he's honest.
The other one is, I think we need to look more charitably back on it. A lot of our primary sources are East Coast authors who are looking for sensational headlines, living out after all of sensational. And also, when I read the original writings of Brigham Young and Joseph Smith, it becomes obvious to me, everybody knows the plural marriages, but nobody knows the plural brotherhoods. There were ceilings between men who wanted to be brothers. If I loved Brad because I'd served with him, both in a mission, maybe in a war or something, I could seal myself to him as a brother. And it becomes plainly obvious that there was a very wide non-sexual element to polygamy. And Joseph Smith was trying to create a worldwide universal human family because he viewed that as the most beautiful gift God gave us. And I think we need to be more charitable and look at our historical thinking of what polygamy was.
And I'll be real brief with this, but I believe
mental
that the
gymnastics.
doctrines are eternal, 100%. You see them in the Old Testament, you see polygamy was practiced.
Exactly, that's why no gay ceiling. Exactly.
God allows for this. At times that God encourages it and commands it. I am personally descended from polygamists, and I think if I were asked to live the law of polygamy, I would do exactly what my first polygamous ancestor did and talk to my wife about it, pray about it to know about what is the true thing we should be doing, and try to find what it is that we need to be doing. Because I think we get this weird idea that God wanted for us to have an easy church. I don't know why there is a million there that people are like, why would he let this happen if this is so difficult? Jesus literally said to people, like, this is a hard saying if you can hear it. I think that this is a difficult thing for us to deal with, and that is one of the hallmarks of the true church of God, that there will be difficulty, but we need to wrestle through those things in order to grow and become better.
Hey, Sean, can I ask a question?
You have 50 seconds?
Yeah, so I guess what's interesting about polygamy is when you... No, I'll let you have some of my time, because honestly, this is a legit question. is that, now I get it. It was delayed, bro. Chemo brain. Polygamy's weird, let's just face it. There, you got your soundbite. Especially in a modern context. I only believe it was ever instituted when God wanted to raise up a righteous generation, whether it's in the Old Testament or in the 1800s. And my fear as I look at what leftist secularism has done to our country, there's only 2 states that actually have a replacement birth rate right now. It's South Dakota and Utah. Now, Utah's not polygamous, but it still has that cultural push of having children and creating more family units. So I'm curious, just from your standpoint, because I really want to ask this honest question, is if the alternative to religious traditional family is the society we're living in now, however you want to call it, how are we replacing ourselves? Because that which is not sustainable won't sustain itself.
And we're there.
Like,
Actually over. But
okay.
I want to thank you so far for your honest answers and answering the questions. I really do. And it's going well. You have 8 minutes to respond to whatever question. That's the question I gave them. Go ahead, my brother.
I'm of the firm opinion that it would probably be best if a lot of our society did not replace itself.
Over 50% of males don't reproduce right now.
Well, something also that you had mentioned, Cardon, which was a classic apologetic trope, which is that when you get blindsided because the church has not been telling you stuff, has been hiding it, what was it that Elder Ballard and President Oates said in that face-to-face devotional promo, right? It says, oh yeah, some of these questions are really, really tough, right? And then Elder Ballard says, those are the questions that we'll avoid. He actually said it. That's when you say, oh my gosh, I can't believe he said it. That's what they do. They avoid the tough questions. They give you the milk before the meat. The milk before the meat, isn't that funny? The funny thing is, I've lived for 40 years. They never get to the meat. It's always like that 1980s commercial. Where's the beef? Well, they keep promising it. And they say it's in the temple. And then I went to the temple. And I tried to love the temple. I really did. I went there the first time in November of 1979. The Provo Temple. Right after I got to the MTC, I really tried. But then, after so long, and after reading apologists talking about, no, it's not masonry, no, it's not masonry, no, it's not masonry, well, guess what? It's masonry. It is warmed over masonry. It's like there's a guy out front saying, get your Masonic rituals,
Yes,
get your warmed over Masonic rituals,
Yep.
and a program. That's really all it is. And the same movie, it's not that great the first time, I gotta tell you. Okay? Maybe you like it. If you do, God bless you. But it was a good thing they had people standing up and sitting down all the time. Otherwise, it's snoozeville. All right, so anyway, that's that. But what Cardon was saying was this great trope. He went off on a tangent, believe it or not. It's perfect, okay? It's always our fault. That's the deal.
Exactly.
Whenever we don't find out about stuff, it's our fault.
Yep.
Because we didn't study enough, because we didn't find the stuff the church is hiding from us. That's the deal. Remember the 5 rules that the church plays by? I can't remember them. I hope some of you will. We're going to hide stuff from you. Then we're going to lie about hiding stuff from you.
This is a
And finally,
debate
at the end,
with
if you talk about
RFM
stuff we're hiding from you,
the
we will
guys
hide
on
you.
Midnight, Mormons,
That's what the
Cardon,
church says. That's the rules we play by.
Kwaku, and the other guy.
So it is always our fault because it is never the fault.
Oh yeah,
Nothing's ever
RFM
the
does a
fault.
podcast like John Delant. Yes, he does.
Nothing's ever the fault.
RFM is on YouTube.
Nothing.
Mormonism
You're a
Live.
faithful Mormon, and you do what you're supposed to do. And we know this because the church leaders tell us that it is wrong to what, everybody?
Criticize the church even if the criticism is true.
By the way, just so everybody can hear it, because I know we're recording, but I think everybody said was, it is wrong to criticize the leaders of the church.
Even if the criticism is true.
Criticism is true. So it can never be their fault, which means it always has to be ours. And we wonder why there's so much depression among the Latter-day Saints, so much anxiety, so much toxic perfectionism. I won't speak for anybody else except me. And boy, did I experience
Queer Sunflower, I agree with you.
Because no matter how much I did, it was never enough. It was never good enough.
I'm agnostic.
There's always props being given, whether it's sacrament meeting or general conference, that let me know there was more that I had to do in order to be acceptable to God. I know that one of these over here, one of these people, I think it might be Kwaku, was talking about a relationship with Jesus Christ. Within the context of the Mormon church, please don't make me laugh. All right. The Mormon church is not about bringing people to a relationship with Jesus Christ. It's about bringing people to a relationship with Russell M. Nelson. And that's it. The church is there as a mediator between the members and Jesus Christ. You can't get to Jesus Christ without the leadership of the church, without the priesthood they claim to hold, without the ordinances of salvation and the ordinances of the exaltation. But what they end up being is like the very same Pharisees in the New Testament that Jesus Christ told them, not only do you not go into heaven, you forbid anybody else to go into heaven too. And that's what I see over and over with the leaders. By the way, nice straw man, it's not malicious, okay? What I'm saying is not malicious. It's after 40 years of hard study and hard knocks in the real world. And that's sometimes what you get when you're a boomer. But the deal is this.
The whole debate, it's RFM is debating on Kwaku, Cardon, Ellis.
I owe
Yeah.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I know.
The leaders are not trying to be malicious, all right? They are not sitting back there. What was it Elder Holland who said recently in, what was that fireside, something? Oh, was it England? Yeah, in London. You know, well, we were just sitting over there rubbing our hands this morning thinking, what fairy tales can we tell the members of the church, right? Well, of course he's not. What the leaders have been doing since, well, probably since the beginning, is they are withholding, first off, they know the church is true. Let's start with that as a premise. I don't go along with people who think that, oh, they are Machiavellian up there and just going, we know this isn't true, and we're just doing it for the money and tithing and all this kind of stuff. I don't believe that's the case. I believe that leaders of the church, just like me for 30 some odd years, knew this church was true and want to bring it to other people and want to keep members from leaving the church because your exaltation depends upon it. And the exaltation of converts depends upon joining the church and being faithful. Well, that's not going to happen if we tell everything that we know. That's why we're not going to tell you, speaking for the leaders of the church, we're not going to tell you the negative things of the church. Not because we're being malevolent, but because we're doing it for God. Because only in this church can you be saved. Negative information about the church will keep people from coming in and cause people to leave. Therefore, we will tell only one side of the history, the correlated, whitewashed, sanitized version of the history. And Boyd K. Packer was nice enough in 1980 or 1981 in his talk, the mantle is far, far greater than the intellect, when he was talking to all the teachers in the church, all the CES instructors, all the BYU professors, and he said it. He said, there's all this negative stuff about the church. You are not to talk about it. And you don't repeat it. It's like disease germs. And maybe you'll catch it. You only talk about the faith-promoting side of the church. And that's the context for the famous quote, not all truths are useful. Okay? So they are on record. And that was published as the first article in BYU Studies after he gave the talk. So they are on record. This is the plan, this is the agenda, and then Boyd K. Packer told all the professors and CES instructors, if you don't go along with me in hiding this stuff from the members of the church and your students, then you will be looking for new employment, and you'll probably be spending eternity in a barren world.
This is in Murray, Utah.
All right.
Murray, Utah.
Question real quick? Format, yeah.
Are we saying what we want, or are we responding to the topic? Because I thought this was supposed to be about polygamy, but
This is what happens in the format when
He's a little loquacious.
I presented you with a question about polygamy. You gave your response. He has a chance to respond and say whatever he's going to use his time for, and you have now 3 minutes to summarize. Now, I can't monitor what everyone says. Now I'm going to give him a question, and then you can use your time to say what you're going to say. So you have 3 minutes summary and back one.
All right. I do find it interesting that you had a full 8 minutes and yet still said so little about polygamy. I feel like there's a ton to say. So I just...
None of it's any good.
As a product of living, I think I'm pretty good.
So, I don't know. As I'm listening to what you're saying, I feel like you have unrealistic expectations of history. I think that it's interesting to look at, even like we talked about, where we are at now with this debate. It was difficult for us to even nail down a story that people probably don't even agree in the audience as to what actually happened to get us here on this debate stage tonight. We can't even establish that as true. And yet you have expectations that the entire church should have a solid narrative the entire time. You talk about this as though you have people hiding history all over the place, and yet you just so happen to say the very things that on the record that you are now using to say that they're liars. We recognize that it is not the fault of church leaders. I think that's an oversimplification of it. We should not criticize church leaders, not because they're never wrong, but because being critical is unproductive. I think that when we look at, and I know it's funny to hear me say that when most of what we do is be critical, right? As here we are, it's human nature. But I think that when you look at the things being the fault of church leaders, I don't think any communication problem in the world is ever a one-way street. I don't think that the church tries to tell its members that it is 100% our fault if we misunderstood something. I have never had that impression ever in my life from the church.
So, yeah, I just wanted to go a brief recap. So I'm here in Murray, Utah. They're having a debate, a discussion between RFM and then the three TBMs, Kwaku, Cardon, Ellis, and then that other guy in the middle who's talking. Yeah, it's interesting to see their perspective and the mental gymnastics, you know. Oh, I went to Utah for Thrive. I'm going to Thrive. John Delen's thing, by the way. And it's nice and warm in Utah. It's 60 degrees and 60 degrees is warm. Well, I'll go back to the discussion. RFM is Radio Free Mormon. He has his podcast every Wednesday on YouTube called Mormonism Live. Him and Bill Reel, they do a weekly podcast. I know, right? The garments are not enough protection. And they're not even wearing masks. I'm kind of freaked out too, because hardly anyone's wearing masks, and it's like a super spread. I'm like next to the door. So yeah. I'll go back to the debate, so join with me. Okay, I'll be back. No, not recovery. It's Radio Free Mormon. Oh yeah, there used to be a website called Recovery for Mormonism.
Every job title can be taught. We have to be more charitable to our ancestors that built this thing. We can't be that cynical.
Thank you. Okay, RFM, your question, you get 8 minutes, then respond any way you want. What you said you were asking us.
So we don't have to stay on topic.
No, I mean, obviously. Ideally, yes. Ideally, yes. Stay on topic. Please stay on topic. RFM, suppose you can only talk about 3 things for a year on your program about Mormons. 3 things that you find absolutely reprehensible, unforgivable, needs to change, and people need to understand everything they can about these 3 things about the church today. You get 3, and put them in order. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. All right? What will you cover and why? You have 8 minutes. Go, brother.
Thank you. I think that one of the things I want to cover, and which we do cover on a number of episodes, has to do with social issues. And it has to do with, right now today, the reluctance of the church to accept on an equal footing in its membership gay people, lesbian people, trans people, and any other kinds of people. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting some of the different categories, but I think you know what I'm talking about. every time the church seems to take one step forward, then something happens when Elder Holland gets up and starts talking about muskets. And everybody goes, what? Especially from Elder Holland. I've heard from a number of seasoned members of the church boomers how disappointed they were with what was said. Not only because of what was said, but because of who said it. They had an idea that their hopes were pinned on Elder Holland to be a moderating influence. And then he gets up at BYU in August of this year, 2021, for those listening in the future, and he starts talking about musket fire. And I know that you did an episode defending him on that. The deal is this. No, he wasn't saying go out and get your muskets and start shooting gay people. We understand that. The deal is that in an environment where in the church we have got extremely fringe, right, DesNat people who are very willing to take up arms against the sea of homosexuals, and by opposing in them, forgive me Shakespeare, using that kind of language.
It's a debate
Is not
with RFM
it is not true.
Cardon,
And a good, wise leader recognizes the fact that there are people who hear that message
I don't know, the guy in the
and they
middle.
go
I forgot
out
his name.
and do things that the leader would never come out and want anybody to do.
Yeah.
You gotta be careful about that. So the other thing that was talked about over here about homosexuals. I mean, Kwaku said, time will come hopefully when gay man and gay man will be sealed in the temple. Okay? I think that would be great. And I think it will happen. But this is another principle of apologetics, one that I engaged in frequently and one which I see often, which is apologists for the church almost always create a different church than the one the church leaders teach to us in general conference. And then they start defending this fake church that they've created as if it is Mormonism, and then say, look at how great my defense was. Well, the problem was, that's not Mormonism. Mormonism has got to be,
I
at
know
least if you're
everyone's
looking at
asking
it, I think at its basic roots, it's got to be what the leaders of the church are teaching us today. That's what Mormonism is. And we know that because we have to follow them and not criticize them, right? So having said all that, that's one thing. And also, another thing that was very shocking to people was in 2015, that was when the Supreme Court
on Facebook.
legalizing gay marriage, 2015, because it was right after that. The church put in that policy of exclusion, and it got leaked on November 5th of 2015. Next January 2016, Russell and Nelson said that was a revelation from God. It was received by Thomas S. Monson, and we were all of us there present and privileged to sustain that as a revelation from God. 3.5 years later, it's rebirthed, and that's a revelation. Okay? That was hard for a lot of people to understand. And I can understand because apparently God resembles a dithering, somewhat senile old man
Thank you.
who cannot see what's going to be
I'm kind of
happening
because
as
like
a
hardly
result of
anyone's
this
or wearing
revelation
masks inside. It's like
to his leaders.
I'm like hoping they're all
And the
vaccinated.
pain and the agony and the
Thank
trauma
God
that
I
it
did my
caused so many
booster
people
a
that
week
3.5
ago.
years later it had to be reversed. So God contacted them again and said, hey, you know that revelation they gave you 3.5 years ago? I've been thinking. Let's not do that anymore. Okay? So that is something, and that is something that happens in our own lifetime. It's not the 125 years it took to reverse the priesthood ban, which is not in anybody's lifetime. You actually have to study to find it out. This change, people found out in real time. That was part of their lived experience. And they don't understand how it is that God could not see the future. I mean, even 3.5 years down the road, that shouldn't be too much for God. I think it's too much for the leaders of the church, but it shouldn't be too much for God. So I was talking about that one issue. How much time do I have to talk about the other two?
Oh, you've got 3 minutes.
Great. Second one is polygamy. Is polygamy because I think that President Nelson, who will have Danzel and Wendy for all eternity, you know, he's got that big block from the Salt Lake Temple, that big block of granite with his name on it. Doesn't have an end date yet, but it does have Danzel's, and it's got a place for Wendy too. I've got a feeling that if you look really closely, there's also a place for sharing you.
Oh.
I'm just saying. I don't know that that's true. But yes, obviously, polygamy is going to be part of eternity. It has to be. And the problem with polygamy isn't that it was a long time ago or it's a long time in the future and it's left the kingdom. The problem is that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy. He had at least 33 different wives. At least. People differ because the records were hidden so well. And, right? That's why. And so they have to figure it out. It's 33 is a baseline minimum. 11 of those women were already married to other men when Joseph Smith married them. And some of the men he got out of the way by calling them, God got them out of the way, by calling them on missions to foreign countries. Some of those, at least one, if not two, were 14 years old when the 30-some-odd Joseph Smith married them. Or was it 14 or was it a few months shy of 50? I can never remember. But the problem is that when I learned about this, I was sick in my heart because I loved Joseph Smith. I revered him as a prophet. And to find out that this was actually true, by the way, good job.
I know, right? By the way, I know, Sam. That is so true. Too bad Joey Smith didn't have a bulletproof vest. Yes, I love it. You should do a video, Sam.
The church recognizes it and has to put out an essay on it. And I will tell you that today when I was thinking about it, I thought about Nathan the prophet from the Old Testament. Because there was a certain guy who was a king, his name was David, and he took somebody else's wife for him. And he's got all the women that he could possibly want in the world, and he wants Uriah. He wants Uriah's wife. And Nathan comes to him and he says, hey, I know this guy who had like all the sheep in the world. And there's this little poor guy over here. He's only got one sheep. And the guy with all the sheep in the world says to the guy with one sheep, I want your sheep. I'm going to take your sheep. What do you think about that, King David? And King David says, that's horrible. That's atrocious. That guy should be killed. And Nathan says to him, you are the man. You are the man. And that's one of the reasons it makes me so sad. Are we done? Okay, Book of Abraham was the third. Listen to Robert Rittner, 13 hours, done.
So I want to address, at first you talked about violence and about the brethren perhaps aspiring right-wing designates to be violent. I also agree that designates are an issue in our church. But 15-year-olds making memes are not compared to FBI crime reports of arson of chapels. We have people making memes. Your side is burning down our buildings.
It's not my
Our
side.
side is not.
Wait a second. I'm not going to stand for that. It is not my side.
Hey, it's my time.
It's not my
It's my
side.
time. Your side.
Can't do it.
Took
That's a
the
lie.
light.
You're a lie.
All right, I'm gonna go. Okay, you've had a lot of time. Your side is the one that tried to sneak a porn star into our temple and make a lesbian sex scene. We would never do that.
You say that
Your
like-
side.
Oh God, that's the new name. Who knows what?
We already know if we were living in the 19th century what your side would be doing. Your side would be the ones with the guns. Your side is the only side actively being violent.
Oh, okay. Ad hominem attacks. No. No. Is that why they're wearing vests? Oh, no.
This is something that the anti-Mormon podcasters don't like to bring up, but you can look up the FBI crime reports and the heightened government security on our actual buildings itself, because again, this is the side that's trying to burn things down. This is the side that threatens us, sends us threatening messages and videos. Which
Exactly.
is why
That's why they have the vest. They're paranoid. I think I'm done with that. Like, are you freaking serious? Like, no. He's playing the victim complex. Like, no. Yeah, exactly. That's why they're wearing vests. Agreed. Like, what the fuck? Anywho, I'll go back.
I see all kinds of burn it the F down with truth and so on and so forth. That you're going to apply the same reasoning of Elder Holland's benign musket fire comment then you would have to accept responsibility for the increased arson against our chapels and violence against our people. You can't have your cake and eat it too. It either goes both ways or it doesn't go either way. What he's saying is true, and that is not a straw man argument. These are stats. These are third-party federal road investigation. You can go look up as soon as we read this room.
And we use language like, this is what the leaders have done to you. They are making you sad. They're making you depressed. What's that going to do to somebody who is actually on the brink of causing violence? We've literally seen what it does.
Yeah, it happens with 2BMs.
This is happening repeatedly, and it's this side that's driving that vitriol.
I gotta say also, I don't know where this "don't criticize leaders of the church" came from. I think we're Get out of your system. I'm aware that having grown up in Los Angeles, not in the Wasatch Front or somewhere else, that I might have had a different lived experience than you. We don't make entire movies in Hollywood, right? Produce movies about small town America being different from big town America without it being based on some kind of truth. So I believe you when you say that there was some kind of cultural influence that may have been negative in your formative years. But I can tell you, anybody that's familiar with our show, there's a healthy debate on what we agree and don't agree on. But one thing we agree on is the most important thing is what God thinks through personal revelation, and the purpose of prayer and trusting in leaders, even if you may not agree with them, is for what we perceive as the positive building of the kingdom. It doesn't mean we never agree or disagree.
That's what they're talking about.
I feel like I grew up in a different church than the one you guys complain about. Brad, take it away. I don't want to take your time.
I just want to say that I completely understand.
That's what his name is, Brad. The guy in the middle.
Because one thing that I want people to know is that our side is not blind to recognizing that there are difficult things for people to deal with within the church. We don't just say every single thing that you've ever experienced is completely, just gloss over. That's not what we say. What we believe is that God knows we will go through hard times. Some of those hard times will be because of things in the church. The church will be difficult. I want you to know that the only side that will ever tell you that things are never your fault and that you never need to do anything to change, that is the side of the devil. This has been from the very beginning what we have had a war in heaven over, whether or not we have responsibility for our own actions. This is something that we need to take responsibility for and recognize, hey, there will be hard things in this life. We have to recognize what those are and work them out with God.
Do we have more time?
Or are we at?
Okay. Well, I just want to say on the subject of polygamy and really the idea of sexual ethics in general, if I take a look at the voices in Mormon media across the board, from Radio Free Mormon to Mormon Stories to Midnight Mormons to Saints Unscripted, I can look at all of them. If I look at the faithful LDS side, all I see are people telling you to love your spouse, stay in your marriage, and build up your family. When I look on the ex-Mormon side, I find accusations of sexual assault from John DeLynn. I find allegations of swinging with Bill Reel. I find a number of quite insane. I'm going by your show. It's my time to speak. All right, thanks. Okay, can you stop? Thank you very much. Okay, so when I look at it, I can see the faithful side promoting healthy marriages and healthy families, and the ex-Mormon side promoting a lot of very bad stuff. You can go look at it on their own show. So I'm dealing with 2021 in real time. What you're saying does not add up to what you're living up to. What you're advocating, saying the church has done and what Mormonism represents, and with polygamy and sexual ethics, your side cannot keep their sexual ethics together. Why on earth would I ever trust what you have to say about Joseph Smith when the people on your side have been so rather degenerate and horrible in their own marriages, their own women?
Because we don't promote it. We don't promote sexual purity. We don't promote purity culture.
Specifically addressing the things that you brought up. With the Book of Abraham, I would invite you to, as you go out and hopefully study what Robert Rittner had to say, maybe compare what Robert Rittner had to say with other things he had to say outside of the Book of Abraham. And you'll notice that he's not consistent with himself. He does not give you a clear idea. I don't think he was being unbiased when he was talking about the Book of Abraham. I think there are very important things within the Book of Abraham that you can learn very good, deep gospel truths from. And if you look at the work of John Dee, Stephen Smoot, you will find very, very good things within the Book of Abraham that prove that it is, in fact, a historical record. I think, to my knowledge, Robert Richter is the only person that we have that's saying anything bad about the Book of Abraham. To my knowledge.
No, New York Times in 1910, 1915.
And with the Book of Abraham, I think that is the gist of what I want to get across. When it comes to the priesthood ban, I agree, it's a difficult thing to deal with, it's a difficult thing to understand. But it's something that we need to take our time and pray about and learn from God. They wrote these gospel topics essays not to try to brush everything under the rug and then hide it. You say 3 clicks as if that's a difficult thing to get through. It's right there. And time's up.
All right, 3 minute wrap up on your side of everything that's been said. You now can speak.
Thank you. This is one of the classic non seculars that Midnight Mormons engage in. First off, they do character assassination on anybody and everybody who is a critic of the church. They make stuff up.
It's on your own show, dude.
No!
They make all sorts of crap up, and then they lie about it, and they trumpet it as if they have any clue as to what they're talking about. By the way, spoiler alert, they don't. These are the people who are talking about me inciting violence. Oh no, it's not me. Oh, it's the people who are on my team. It's other people. It's people sneaking people. By the way, so you know, yeah, it was a joke. Duh. It was a joke. You say that like there's something wrong with it. I'm sorry I have to actually explain it to you. The old saying goes, if you have to explain it, it's not funny. Anyway, I hope some people here recognize what's going on. That's a bit of a train of thought that went before. But these are the same people. The irony is rich here. I'm glad I wore some high boots. Because these are the same people who retweet a video depicting in meme form John Boleyn getting his head bashed in with a baseball bat. And they're saying, oh, we're the ones who are inciting violence. These are the people, and Kwaku did it tonight, my gosh. Making up.
Rosebud's alive?
Hey, shut up.
No, she's mentally troubled, and you should not be taking advantage of a mentally troubled person.
I'm listening to her voice,
No,
but you're not doing it.
Kwaku, please go by the rules. We're gonna have total chaos. Please.
Thank you. And talking about people having serial affairs based on nothing and going on your program and publicly proclaiming it as if it's fact, and then you claim that, oh, we're the ones who were inciting violence. You twist a compliment that I gave you, which was actually sincere, twist it into a lie, and then call me a liar. That's really low on the rung as far as calling John Boleyn a sex predator and Bill Reel a multiple serial adulterer. I think liar's way down there. But it's the same kind of thing. And yet you are the ones who are saying that over here we're inciting violence. These are difficult issues. You mentioned difficult issues about polygamy or the priesthood ban. Difficult issue is code for an apologist, which means I can't answer that. There is no faithful answer to it. That's what a difficult issue is in apologists or Mormon apologists speak. I know I used to be one. So the idea is that we acknowledge it's a difficult issue and we move on to something else, and hopefully you won't hold our feet to the fire. Okay? So, the other non sequitur is about trusting what I say about Joseph Smith. I'm not asking anybody to trust what I say about Joseph Smith or about anything else. I deal in facts. You deal in baseless accusations.
And that segment is wrapped up beautifully.
Yay!
Everyone all right? All right. Here we go for the next segment. Mormon issues facing the church today. It's kind of been talked about. We'll bring it up again. Kwaku, you already talked about it, mentioned it, but the issue of homosexual relationships has been hotly bandied about in LDS Church for a few decades. Post-Prop 8 in California, a few years back.
I think I'm going to stop because my battery's running out. So Yeah, you guys, I think you can watch it on YouTube. Go on YouTube. It's Yeah, it is Thrive the Rest. So Heart of the Matter on YouTube, where you can watch the rest of the debate. Yeah, I think. Yeah, Sean is live. Heart of the Matter, the YouTube channel. So yeah, you can go to that. You can go to that channel. Yeah. So I'm about to go because my phone's about to die. I want to have batteries. All right, you guys have a good night. Bye. And I still love Mormons. I don't want to kill them. Poor them. I know. Have a good night, you guys. Bye. Love you.